Welcome to the PrepZone here on DMVSTREAM.com. I'm Brian Gardner, joined by Brandon Parker and Noah Frank for today's game. And fellas, what do you say we talk about some high school football today? Last week of the regular season. A lot of fun coming up here on the show. Got a great one for you today. And here's what we're going to talk about today. We'll look at what happened last week in the penultimate weekend of the regular season in high school football here in the DMV. Recap a handful of games there. A lot of great action in the DMV, of course, this past weekend. And we'll take a look at what's coming up ahead. DeMatha Good Counsel, Tuscarora and Broad Run, and of course, Lake Braddock and South County in the game of the week, potentially the game of the season. That should be a lot of fun. Looking forward to checking that one out and talking about that with you two kind sirs here today. But again, this is the Prep Zone here on DMVStream.com. We'll also speak with Mark Giannotto of the Washington Post about Frank Beamer, his retirement, and what that means for the area recruiting landscape here in the DMV. When we come back, we'll get into it with the weekly recaps coming up after a short break here on the Prep Zone.
Next step, I will be heading to New York City, the Big Apple, and I will be working as an associate producer on World News Tonight with David Muir. And that'll include a lot of technical things, I think, from what I heard in my interviews and speaking with some of the staff members and the executive producer. A lot, editing VOs, VOSOTs, SOTs, but also working my way up to being possibly a secondary shooter in the event that a reporter goes out on a breaking story, or maybe David Muir goes out on a breaking story. When I learned that I got it, it was just it was an opportunity I couldn't say no to. It's ABC News, and you don't often get those calls. But I will say this, and I 100% firmly believe this: Synthesis, my time with them, helped me set. That's the reason why I got the job.
Let's get right into it. PG County has produced a lot of football talent in the past years, but let's take a look at it from...
I would say the things that I learned during my time at Synthesis, learning how to never reject an opportunity, no matter what role you're playing, whether it's a cam op, whether it's talent. Also, it taught me, I think, to realistically see my goals. You're not going to achieve things like that. It's 1 in a million shot that happens. You have to work your way up, and I'm a firm believer that because I do want to eventually do on-air work, is that you have to master everything behind the camera before you get in front of it.
Welcome back to the Prep Zone. Brian Gardner joined by Brandon Parker and Noah Frank. And guys, a lot of fun action to talk about from what was another great weekend in high school football here in the DMV. And Brandon, let's start with you. McNamara and St. John's, a heck of a game, a bit of an upset and a bit of a comeback.
Yeah, this one looked like it was over in the second quarter because McNamara was down 28-7 to a really good St. John's team that's known for its strong defense. But out of nowhere and unexpectedly, really, because McNamara was without its starting quarterback, Ramar Williams, but they had a lot of quick strike plays like this one. You'll see that's Charles Kelly at quarterback. He stepped in the last couple games for Ramar Williams, who's out with a bruised collarbone. So he said he grew up, playing quarterback, but he hasn't played at all since he got to McNamara. He's been a receiver, but he made some huge plays, and him and Brian Thompson had a lot of connections. Here you see Kamari Murray, who's actually their #1 receiver with a good touchdown, but this is another long bomb to Thompson. He had 3 touchdowns, and they just reeled off, a bunch of points to get back in this game and eventually get the win, which it says a lot for this team to be able to mix and match the guys that they've had because of the injuries they've had. They had to move, again, Kelly to quarterback. They had to move Xavier Williams to running back, but they're so athletic that, they're able to overcome that. And granted, I should point out St. John's was without their top defender, Terrell Hall, so I think that might have had a little bit to do with the outcome. But still, all the credit to McNamara and Kelly, just his ability as a dual threat guy. He brings some of what Ramar Williams brings to the table, and that's why they got a critical win in the playoff race.
You mentioned how it seemed like it was done in the second quarter. At one point, McNamara was down 28-7 in this game, and not only is it a big comeback, a big upset, because St. John's, number 12 going into this contest, and McNamara, they're 5-4 now, but playoff hopes still slightly alive in the WCAC?
They are. We'll talk a little bit about that later, but that win was huge going forward for them.
Well, it seemed like it was a great contest, and of course, big-time player stepping up in a big-time spot, in a spot he hadn't normally been in. Let's move on now to Noah, with Potomac Falls and Stonebridge. And Another comeback. It seems like it was the theme of the weekend.
Yeah, well, Stonebridge did not make this game easy on themselves. They dug a 17-0 hole in the second quarter and really didn't have anything going until that point. But they got bailed out by the running game, and specifically by Josh Brees, who kind of took over and ended up over 200 yards on 24 carries. His biggest one, the 66-yard touchdown run that accounted for a full third of that yardage. But down 17-0 in the second quarter, came roaring back. A little help from his backfield mate as well. Dwayne Winston had an 18-yard touchdown run in the second half, and that was the deciding score. Ended up putting them over the top, 2017 final. And really, we talked about this a little bit before the show, but kind of crazy mix and match of wins and losses so far for this team. They're only 5-4 on the season, but you go back, you look at their last 4 wins, all over opponents with above 500 records, winning records. Potomac Falls, Broad Run, West Springfield, Chantilly. So probably a team that nobody really wants to run into in the playoffs.
Before we get too far away from this, Joshua Brees with 24 carries, 200 yards, a 66-yard touchdown run. You're the expert. Just tell me, is that good?
Yeah, I mean, and anytime you can lean on a guy for 20-plus carries, in high school, he's going to be your workhorse. But when you're averaging, almost 10 yards a carry on those carries, you're doing something right.
And the guy that small. I mean, you saw the picture. He looked like a little kid compared to the other guys out there, but he got it done.
He might look like a little kid, but he plays like a grown man.
Yeah.
Stonebridge down 17-0 in this game. The win only puts them to 5-4, and that's a down season for Stonebridge, which is a little bit shocking, of course, winning record being a down season. But you mentioned how they're a team nobody wants to face. They're beating these good teams. You reeled them off: Potomac Falls, Broad Run, West Springfield, Chantilly, all teams that have winning records. Why do you think they're so tough to play against?
Well, you mentioned, they are sort of a legacy program. They're a program that's used to winning big games. Certainly we see that at different levels of sports. Teams that have a tradition of winning games, who have coaches who have kind of been in those spots before, have a tendency to be able to get their kids up for those kinds of games. So, they could be a sleeper playoff pick, come in a couple weeks.
No one wants to run into them, that's for sure. And for Potomac Falls, they blow a 17-0 lead. Going into after this game, how do they feel?
I mean, that's, you got to find a way to rally. You got one game left on the schedule. Try to figure out what you did wrong at halftime, and obviously they got off, in the right direction. That was what you want to do with your game plan, but ran into a buzzsaw in the second half.
Stonebridge has Briar Woods on Friday. Potomac Falls, they'll take on Edison at home. Should be another couple of fantastic games in that one. Brandon, let's talk about another big matchup in this past weekend. Damascus and Seneca Valley, a top 10 matchup. And, Damascus, they kind of flexed their muscles, didn't they?
Yeah, they did. I mean, coming in, they were the top team in the Maryland area and Montgomery County, so this was a good test for them. And you see this guy, Jake, we want the funk. He's a workhorse. He carried the ball 40 times in this game, and he had a lot to show for it with about 200 yards rushing. But the key, though, is because of what Funk does, they can run play action passes like this, and the defense often bites, and they can have a lot of plays like that one that just went for a touchdown, and then the other one from Marcus Vincent, who does a lot of plays out of the backfield as well. So you kind of have to pick your poison with them. I mean, a lot of their offense is centered around Jake Funk, but once they just got going on Friday, it's just tough to stop them in their downhill running style. So they've been rolling. This is kind of, like you said, a statement win for them going into the playoffs next week. And, they have vengeance on their mind after come up just short of the state title last year. And with the way Jake Funk is running, and he's been able to, even though he runs so hard, he's been able to rest, himself during these games because they've been blowing out a lot of teams. You see, again, 40 carries for 264 yards. He's just a tough back, a good pickup for Maryland to have coming into their program. And Damascus definitely is one of the favorites. Actually, it's not the favorite going into the playoffs. Damascus,
they're undefeated. They've got to be in the conversation for best team in the area, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's tough going up against the private schools that are in the WCAC, but for 1 week there, we had them, at number one in the poll, and they made it with a statement win to begin the season against Quince Orchard, and then they just had this one against Seneca Valley. So, they've earned their right to be respected among the area, whether it be public or private schools.
Is their defense that good that they hold a good Seneca Valley team to only 3 points?
They are. Jake Funk is part of that defense. They have a lot of two-way guys, but, they just like they run hard on offense, they hit hard on defense. They're physical. They don't give up yards easily at all. So you see the fact that they could hold a team that had scored 40 points or more at ease the last few weeks to 3 points says a lot.
Jake Funk carried the ball 40 times. You mentioned he's a guy who can be a two-way player. Do you worry about overuse at all with him? He is only a high school kid.
Yeah, that's always a concern when you see a high number like that. But like I said, a lot of their games have been blowouts, so he's rested a lot of fourth quarters or even whole second halves that he hasn't had to play. So I think it's evened out. Going forward in the playoffs, they're going to definitely need every bit of energy and every yard he can get off carries. But I don't think it's a huge concern with the way the season is going.
Damascus has Blair on Friday, trying to finish out a undefeated regular season. Of course, we'll be keeping an eye on that one. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we'll continue looking at the weekend that was in high school football here in the DMV. This is the Prep Zone.
He passed away when I was going to the fifth grade going to sixth grade. I want to say he passed away heart failure, but other than that, my brother stepped up for me, been a father figure for me, so appreciate it. Great relationship. We talk every day. He teaches me a lot of things. Every time he comes home, we're gonna hit the field. He just teaches me a lot, and I'm just listening. He's a great teacher, a father figure for me, so great relationship.
I don't want to say I'm like his father because that will make me old, but I would say it's more like a big brother. He does have Aaron and Derez and Stefan as his older brothers, but they're away doing their thing. You kind of step in and be the big brother to try to guide him the right way while everyone else is away.
It was very important because he went through the whole recruiting process, so he was just telling me things about it, and it's just been great to have him. He knows a lot. He knows a lot about football, a lot about schools, he knows a little bit of everything, so it's great to have him around.
They're similar in skill set, but more importantly, the thing I've seen Steph pass down to Trayvon is the off the field work that it takes to be good. A lot of kids want to be good because they see what's on TV, but you got to fall in love with the work that it takes to be good. So he used to come back when he comes home, he works out with us. We go over to some hills and we run hills, we do ladders. And he's been there multiple times showing not just Trayvon, but showing some of the other kids, this is how you work when you want to get to the level you want to get to. So mainly passing that on, just work ethic.
I wouldn't necessarily say it's tough. I just roll with it, I just go with it. I don't really pay too much mind of what people have to say. I just try to work hard every day, be the best I can, and do whatever I can to help the program win. But other opinions, they really don't matter to me. So I just try to focus and just listen to anything my family tells me. Only thing that really matters to me is my family.
Welcome back to the Prep Zone. Brian Gardner, Brandon Parker, Noah Frank, talking about the weekend that was in high school football. And Noah, let's get right back into it with you. Flint Hill and Murray, and there was another tightly contested game, ended up with one-score contest.
Yeah, so this was actually our WTOP game of the week that our listeners and readers voted on. Nice to give the small schools a little bit of love. It was a really hard-fought, well-contested game. Early touchdown on either side, and Murray kind of hanging as much as they could. They only suit 23 guys. They only dress 23 guys, which, I mean, you talk about the challenges that small schools face. That includes your kicker. So really 22 bodies. They only have 6 linemen, and one of them actually ended up with 2 personal fouls and was ejected. So they were down to 5 linemen, which kind of was the difference. They got worn down, and Flint Hill kind of knew that. They really just powered through with Grant Jenkins, who is not their feature back. He's their fullback, but they used him out of the backfield a little bit on small passes. You can see him getting to the second level. This was just a pure physical game. Not a lot of passing, not a lot of trickery, not a lot of spread formation. A couple passes downfield, but really relying on the heavy fullback. 8 carries, 66 yards, 2 catches, 35 yards. set up their game-winning score coming down in the fourth quarter, and then they sort of just ground the clock away in the last couple minutes for a 14-7 win.
Jenkins is a two-sport guy, also plays lacrosse. He's also a two-way guy. He's a fullback and he's a linebacker. And you mentioned to me before, Jordan Houston, a freshman, is usually the featured back, but it was Jenkins today. Why was that?
Houston's that guy. He's tiny. He's my size. He's 5'9", 160 or so, who can make guys miss and actually has surprising strength for a guy his size. You can kind of see him, get some yards after contact, but he's really the open field guy who, if he can break one, can bust it off to the house. But they just couldn't get him going, and they couldn't find any holes in the defense, and so they figured, hey, we'll go with the senior, we'll go with the guy with a little more meat on his bones who can kind of just wear the other team down, and it became just a game of attrition, and it turned out to be a good game plan.
Huskies take it over the Frogs 14-7. Up next for Murray, they've got Potomac School, Flint Hill. They'll host Sidwell in a crucial game. Brandon, let's talk about West Springfield and Woodson. Woodson, of course, with a tough week, and they actually played this game on the same day that there was a fire in the chemistry classroom, and the school had to be evacuated. A couple of students were injured, but they come away with a emotional win overtime on senior night.
Yeah, a lot of emotions swirling already going into the game because they were honoring one of their former teammates who had committed suicide a couple years ago in a string of those tragic events at the school, and then the fire happens that day. So, like I said, a lot of was on their mind going into the game, on top of the fact that they needed to win, to stay in the playoff race. And they came up with a big effort. JoJo Heisley, the quarterback, and Jack Caldwell, who you see, this is the decisive touchdown pass in overtime. Caldwell's just all over the place. 14 catches for 196 yards and 2 touchdowns. And the defense, you'll see West Springfield actually, they've been trying to get more balance and get more of a run game, but despite what this shows, the Woodson defense, really played well, held their ground against a high-powered offense in West Springfield, and that set up opportunities for the Woodson's offense to make a comeback because they were down 21-7 in the second half, and then they had a long pass play, they recovered an onside kick, and after that, all the momentum shifted back to the Cavaliers. So that moved them back into the playoff picture. They're hanging on for one of the last spots right now, but they're still going to have to get a win in their last game to actually be in the playoffs. But, it says a lot for that team, that school, that community to overcome what was really an emotional night for them.
Like you said, it says a lot for the community, and it's got to be great for the fans, the students to be able to forget about maybe the scary situation every day with that big win.
Yeah, at least for a little while, yeah.
All right, well, let's talk, Noah, about Richard Montgomery and Gaithersburg. Another close game. We had a lot of good ones this past weekend, as we mentioned a couple of times, and the Rockets able to take it by 7.
Yeah, I would talk about senior night, talk about a senior stepping up and really carrying his team, doing something important. Gabe Gomez, who's a third-string running back. You're talking about a guy who is just coming in because other guys have been injured, but he's a senior, stepped up and was huge in this game. Gaithersburg got out to an early lead. They had perhaps the single play of the game, as you'll see right here, 90-yard kickoff return for a touchdown, kind of thing that can often swing a game momentum-wise. That gave him a 14-7 lead. But at home, Richard Montgomery not letting go. Like I said, Gomez came through 22 carries, 126 yards, and in the fourth quarter, the game-winning touchdown, which led Richard Montgomery to their first 4A playoff appearance in 10 years. That's coming off of back-to-back 2-8 seasons. So this is a school that hasn't tasted a lot of success lately. For a senior, a guy who was on the bench earlier in the year to kind of lead the way and make that happen. That's a huge win for that school.
First appearance in 10 years in the postseason. You think they're much of a threat?
When you have a team that turns around like that, and especially when you have guys who can step up and start doing that, you never know. You talk about teams of destiny or teams that kind of find something along the way. Clearly, it doesn't matter. This is a next guy up mentality if your third string seniors coming in and having a game like that.
Before we take a short break, let's talk a little bit, Brandon, about the playoff picture in Maryland, in the WCAC, and in Virginia. We'll begin with Maryland, and there's some things that have been decided and some things that haven't quite.
Yeah, you see kind of a picture of how things look going into the last week. Wheaton is a notable team. They got into the playoffs for the first time since 1996, but a lot of it was a product of Blair having to forfeit 2 of their losses, and that really shook up the playoff picture. And because of that, you see Paint Branch, even though they're at 8-1, they're on the outside looking in right now, and they actually have to play Quince Orchard, a strong team, in the finale to secure their playoff spot. Wise has been strong. We talked about Damascus earlier, and a number of undefeated teams to watch in Maryland. So, the last week will be interesting, as it usually is.
And let's take a look at Virginia as well. Of course, you look at the top with South County and Lake Braddock going at it
this
week.
That's going to be a fun game. We'll talk about that some. But that'll decide the top seed in the 6A North. You see Marshall there at the bottom. They're making playoff appearance just a year after snapping a 25-game losing streak. And then Yorktown and Washington Lee, that's already a big rivalry, and that's a win-and-you're-in game where they play on Friday. And we talked about Woodson. They play T.C. Williams. That's another pivotal game. So really, even though the playoffs don't start for another week, you could really say it's kind of that do-or-die mentality going into Friday.
In the WCAC, there are a lot of things that are still up for grabs, even with a smaller amount of teams.
Yeah, this track with me here, because I'm going to try to explain, the scenario. So, Good Counsel plays DeMatha, St. John's plays Gonzaga, and then McNamara plays O'Connell. So McNamara has to win to remain in the playoff picture. They also need St. John's to lose, and if Good Counsel loses as well, you have a 3-way tie that's going to be decided partly by a coin flip. So let's say they flip a coin, Good Counsel and St. John's get heads. The odd team out, which would be tails, McNamara would get the playoff spot, and then they decide the last spot by a head-to-head based on the teams that got the same coin flip. If that makes sense. It's a little dicey, and that's, you hate to see it come down to that, and it just might, right. But that kind of shows you what's going on this weekend.
Crazy after a long season, they could literally come down to the flip of a coin. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, it'll be the AllMetSports.com weekly fast forward. We'll let you know the games to watch in the DMV this upcoming weekend. This is the Prep Zone. Mark Giannotto of the Washington Post talking about Frank Beamer here on the Prep Zone. And you had a piece on this in the Washington Post. I believe it ran on the website last night, in the paper this morning. How does this affect the recruiting of this area? Of course, Virginia Tech, they come up here to the DMV quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, Virginia Tech has had a established recruiting base here in the DC area. They recruit Northern Virginia really well. They have a commit from Prince George's County right now, and it's going to be really interesting how this changes the landscape around the area, because the bottom line is Virginia Tech hasn't had a new coach in 29 years. We're not really sure how people are going to react to not seeing Frank Beamer, but the thing is, the recruiting landscape around here is going to change dramatically no matter what. For Maryland's looking for a new coach. Virginia could be in the market for a new coach soon. So I do think it's going to have an effect, but it really, time's going to tell. It's going to be who does Virginia Tech hire. Is it Rich Rodriguez? Is it some of the other names we've seen out there? That's going to really determine how the landscape changes in the DC area.
Gut feeling. Welcome back here to the Prep Zone. Again, that was conversation with Mark Giannotto of the Washington Post talking about Frank Beamer and Virginia Tech. To get that conversation in its entirety, visit DMVSTREAM.com. Brian Gardner with Brandon Parker and Noah Franken. Guys, it's time for the AllMetSports.com weekly fast forward. We're checking out what's notable here in the DMV in terms of games this upcoming weekend. And Brandon, let's begin with you. It's always a rivalry matchup when Good Counsel and DeMatha go at it.
Yeah. Lots at stake here on top of the fact that it's a rivalry when you have pretty much the last 10 or 11 WCAC champs going at it in this game. I think the run game is going to be the key for this one, because Good Counsels kind of struggle with their pass game using 2 different quarterbacks. So whoever can establish the run, and they're both sizable, physical teams, I think they'll have the advantage in this game. But DeMatha's got a stable of running backs in Anthony McFarland, Lorenzo Harrison, and Corey Spruill, and then Good Counsel is led by Muhammad Ibrahim and Jonathan Wannett. So again, it'll be interesting to see who gets hot in that bunch, who they're going to rely on behind their strong offensive line. But I've got DeMatha, pulling this one out just because of their workhorses.
No, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, DeMath has been strong all year. They slipped up against Gonzaga, but we've seen them both locally and against national powers be really, really good. Sometimes they start a little slow. It takes them a while to get going, but once they do, they're tough to beat.
Yeah.
I agree with the two of you fine gentlemen. DeMatha is just too tough a team to beat, although Good Counsel has a lot to play for, trying to sneak into the playoffs like we spoke about just a moment ago. So could be a heck of a ball game. Let's move on now. Tuscarora and Broad Run. Noah, another fantastic game to watch.
Yeah, well, Tuscarora's answered the bell with everything that's been thrown at them this year. They've won, and there's not much reason to doubt them. But Broad Run, a little more up in the air. You're not sure if we're going to see Meach Embry. If we do, he's been the best running back, one of the best running backs in the area when he's been healthy. He's dealing with an ankle issue, dealing with a shoulder issue. Still aren't sure if he's going to anchor the offense. If he does, that could tilt this game. You're talking about a Tuscarora team that's more balanced, that's got a senior quarterback who's passed for 1,500 yards, who's got 16 touchdowns, who's their third leading rusher on the ground, who kind of guides the offense. The safer bet seems to be Tuscarora, but you never know depending on what might happen with Meach Embry.
So now you're taking the Huskies.
Yeah, I got to go Tuscarora too. Just, with Hembry's unclear status and actually Broad Run's defense has struggled against, powerful run teams, and Tuscarora definitely has that capability. So I got Tuscarora.
Brandon's also rolling with the Huskies. I'm taking the Spartans at home. Tuscarora's coming off of a bye week. They haven't played since they beat Stonebridge back on the 23rd. And Broad Run, they're at home. They're coming off a loss to Robinson, but I got a feeling the home game, the Spartans, I think they're going to gotta be contrarian.
Yeah.
All right, now hear about what I believe is the game of the weekend with South County and Lake Braddock, a combined 18-0, and the Bruins and the Stallions, and this is going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, this could be a lot of points on the scoreboard, a lot of big plays. South County runs their no-huddle offense along with it being a triple option offense. I'm not looking forward to keeping stats on this game because you look down, you might miss a play. But Lake Braddock has firepower as well. I think what might make the difference here is Lake Braddock's defense has really been stout this year, and if this comes down to a big stand or stop in the fourth quarter, I think Lake Braddock could have the advantage there, so I got the Bruins.
Brandon's got the Bruins, no?
There's not necessarily a home field advantage for everyone in high school, but they've been blowing the doors off people at home. I think they're probably just too strong, so I got Lake Braddock too.
I'm not going to be the contrarian on this one. I'm also rolling with the Bruins. Lake Braddock hasn't lost a regular season game in over a year. The 17th of October at West Springfield last year. They haven't lost a home regular season game since last September, 19-17 against Robinson. But the Bruins, I think they've got it going in this contest. So that's going to about do it for us here on the Prep Zone. Noah, Brandon, it's been a lot of fun. Thanks for doing this. It's been fun.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
So looking forward to another great weekend in the DMV in high school sports. For Noah Frank, for Brandon Parker, I'm Brian Gardner. We'll see you next time. This has been the Prep Zone on DMVSTREAM.COM.